Somewhere between what is real and what should never be remembered, there exists a place where stories are buried, not written in books, not spoken aloud, but passed from fear to fear. These stories were never meant for you. They were locked away, forgotten, sealed behind silence. Every voice you hear belongs to someone who listened too long. Tonight, you will hear what they heard, and once it enters your mind, it doesn't leave. This is your final warning. Welcome to the stories that watch you back.
The forest did not appear on any map. That alone should have been enough to turn the car around. Ethan Walker noticed it just after midnight while driving west through northern Pennsylvania, the kind of place where gas stations vanished without warning and radio stations faded into static that sounded almost like breathing. He had taken the back road to save time, trusting the navigation app without thinking. Now the road narrowed, the trees closed in, and the moonlight barely reached the asphalt. Tall pines leaned inward as if listening. Ethan slowed down. His headlights cut through the fog that had crept in without warning, thick and low, clinging to the road like something alive. The forest on either side looked endless. No houses, no fences, no signs, just trees. Too many trees. His phone lost signal. The GPS froze, the blue arrow spinning uselessly before disappearing entirely. That was when he saw the sign. A wooden sign stood crooked at the edge of the road, half swallowed by vines and moss. The paint had peeled away long ago, but the carved letters were still visible, deep and deliberate. Welcome to Greyhollow, no lights. No reflector paint. Just the sign and the forest behind it, darker than the night itself. Ethan frowned. He had lived in Pennsylvania his entire life and had never heard of Greyhollow. He considered stopping to check the map again, but something about the trees made his skin crawl. They were too close together, their branches twisting overhead like interlocked fingers. He drove on. The road dipped sharply downhill, and the forest seemed to breathe out as he passed the sign. The fog thickened, swallowing the world beyond his headlights. The silence inside the car felt wrong. Even the engine sounded muted, as if the sound was being absorbed. Then the radio turned on by itself. Static hissed, then cleared just enough for a voice to slip through. Low, slow, almost whispering. Ethan reached for the power button, but the radio volume climbed on its own. The voice did not speak words he could understand at first. It sounded like someone trying to remember how language worked. He slammed the radio off. The silence returned, heavier than before. A mile later, the forest opened up. The road led into a small town, Greyhollow. It looked abandoned. Old wooden buildings lined the road, their windows dark and empty. A diner with a cracked sign. A gas station with rusted pumps. Houses sagged beneath the weight of age, porches collapsing, doors hanging open. There were no streetlights, no cars, no movement. Yet the town felt occupied. Ethan felt it in his chest, a pressure like unseen eyes tracking his car as he rolled slowly through the center of town. His headlights swept across a town square with a dry fountain at its center. The stone basin was stained dark, as if something had seeped into it long ago and never washed away. He should have turned around. Instead, the car stalled. The engine coughed once, then died. The headlights flickered and went out. Total darkness swallowed the street. Ethan sat frozen, hands clenched on the steering wheel, heart pounding so loud he was sure someone would hear it. He tried the ignition again. Nothing. The dashboard lights stayed dark. His phone would not turn on. Outside the car, something moved. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. Dragging slightly, as if whoever was walking had forgotten how legs were supposed to work. Ethan held his breath. A shape passed in front of the car, just beyond the windshield. He could not see details, only a darker shadow moving against the night. It paused directly in front of the hood. Then another shape appeared. Then another. They stood silently, surrounding the car. Ethan reached for the door lock even though he knew it was already locked. His breath fogged the windshield. The shapes leaned closer, their outlines wrong, shoulders hunched, heads tilted at unnatural angles. A hand pressed against the glass. The skin looked pale, stretched thin, veins dark beneath the surface. The fingers were too long. The nails looked broken and blackened. The hand slid slowly down the windshield, leaving behind a faint streak, as if the glass itself had been bruised. From somewhere in the town, a bell rang. One slow chime, then another. The shapes recoiled as if startled. They withdrew from the car, melting back into the darkness between buildings. The footsteps faded. The bell stopped. The headlights flickered back on. The engine roared to life. Ethan did not hesitate. He slammed the car into gear and sped forward, tires screeching as he tore through the empty town and back onto the forest road. He did not look back. The forest swallowed Greyhollow behind him, the trees closing in as if the town had never existed. By the time Ethan reached the highway, dawn was breaking. He told himself it was exhaustion, stress, a hallucination brought on by a long drive and no sleep. He did not notice the dirt under his fingernails. He did not notice the faint smell of damp earth clinging to his clothes. And he did not see the mark on the back of his neck, shaped like a circle with jagged lines radiating outward, already darkening beneath his skin. Back in Greyhollow, the forest shifted. The bell tower, long silent, creaked softly as the bell swayed without wind. The town waited. Ethan Walker did not sleep the next night. He tried. He shut the blinds. He turned every lamp on in his apartment until the rooms looked washed out and unreal. He brewed coffee he did not want and stared at the steam as if it might form an explanation. He checked his car in the parking lot 3 times, crouching beside the tires, inspecting the undercarriage, opening the trunk and slamming it shut, listening for something that might answer. Nothing answered. Yet the silence felt crowded. By 2 in the morning, he was on the couch with his shoes still on, staring at the ceiling. Every time he blinked, he saw the shapes again, the wrong angles of their heads, the hand on the windshield, the way the darkness had looked thicker around them, as if the night itself was their skin. He told himself it had been a wrong turn into a decaying town. Rural places were like that. You could miss a sign by a mile and end up somewhere time forgot. But he knew the truth was not that simple. The truth sat under his skin. It started as an itch at the back of his neck, right where the mark had appeared. He had discovered it that morning in the bathroom mirror, twisting awkwardly to see, expecting a bruise from the seat belt. Instead he saw a symbol, dark and circular, ringed by jagged spokes like broken sun rays. It did not look like a bruise. It looked like a brand. The itch grew worse through the day. By evening it became a hot pulse, like something trying to push outward. He scratched until the skin burned, until he tasted copper in his mouth from biting his tongue. The mark did not fade. It deepened. At 3:12 in the morning, every light in the apartment blinked off at once. Ethan sat upright, heart hammering. The refrigerator hum died. The air conditioner clicked silent. The city noise outside his window dropped away as if someone had pulled a plug on the world. In the sudden stillness, he heard a bell. One slow chime. He held his breath, listening. A second chime rolled through the air, low and deep, as if the sound was coming from under the building rather than outside it. Ethan stood, moving carefully across the living room. His phone lay on the coffee table. The screen was black. He tapped it. Nothing. He crossed to the kitchen and opened the drawer where he kept a flashlight. His hands shook. He found it by feel and clicked it on. The beam cut a pale wedge through the darkness. His apartment looked normal, but the shadows had changed. They seemed sharper at the edges, more deliberate, as if they had been arranged. The bell chimed again. Ethan moved to the front door. He pressed his ear to it. Nothing. No footsteps in the hallway. No voices. No elevator. The building felt emptied. He unlocked the deadbolt. The metal clicked louder than it should have. When he opened the door, the hallway was not there. A forest stood beyond the threshold. Pine trunks rose into blackness. Fog hung low and dense. The smell of wet earth rolled into his apartment like a wave. The flashlight beam stretched out and vanished into the mist as if the light could not decide how far it was allowed to go. Ethan froze, mind refusing to assemble what he was seeing. His apartment door opened onto midnight woods. He backed away slowly, never taking his eyes from the doorway. His heel hit the edge of the couch. He nearly fell. The flashlight beam jittered across the threshold, catching drifting fog, needles on the ground, and a broken branch as thick as his wrist. The bell chimed again, closer now. Not louder, but somehow nearer, as if the sound was inside his skull rather than in the air. Then he saw movement between the trees. A silhouette moved through the fog, tall and hunched. Another followed. Then another. They did not walk normally. They slid forward in slow increments, like marionettes pulled by unseen strings. The flashlight beam landed on one of their faces. Or what should have been a face. The skin looked pale and stretched, features smoothed down as if the person had been sculpted from wax and left too near heat. The eyes were open but wrong, too dark, too reflective, with the shine of wet stones. The mouth looked like a thin seam, barely a line. The thing tilted its head and leaned closer, as if smelling him. Ethan slammed the door shut and threw the deadbolt. He stumbled backward, chest heaving, flashlight clutched so tightly his fingers hurt. The apartment was still dark. The silence still heavy. But the smell of forest lingered in the air, damp and cold. He pressed his back to the door. His whole body trembled. He waited for pounding, scratching, anything. Nothing came. The lights remained out. After several minutes, his breathing slowed enough to think. He forced himself to move away from the door and search for his fuse box. The flashlight beam jumped across the walls as he crossed the apartment. When he opened the utility closet, the fuse box was gone. In its place was a rough wooden panel, nailed to the wall like a crude patch. The wood looked old and splintered, damp at the edges, as if it had been cut from something outdoors. Ethan stared, confused. He reached out and touched it. The wood felt cold, almost wet. Something knocked from the other side. 3 slow taps. Ethan jerked his hand away and stumbled back. The taps came again, softer this time, as if whoever was on the other side had heard his fear and found it amusing. He ran. He grabbed his car keys, shoved his wallet into his pocket, and fled the apartment without looking back. He took the stairs down 7 floors, flashlight beam bouncing across concrete steps, his mind chanting one thought over and over. Get outside. Get into the open. Get away from the door. But when he pushed through the lobby entrance, the city street had changed. Fog covered the road. The buildings across the street looked warped, as if viewed through water. The streetlights were off. Every parked car sat dark and lifeless. There were no people. No distant traffic. No sirens. Not even wind. The whole city block felt staged. Ethan stepped out cautiously. His footsteps sounded too loud, too crisp, like he was walking through a soundproof room where only his movements existed. Then he heard something behind him. A soft, dragging noise. He turned. At the far end of the block, where the fog thickened into a wall, a shape stood beside a street sign. It did not move, but Ethan knew it was watching him. The darkness around it seemed to pool at its feet. He started backing toward his car. The dragging noise grew louder. Another shape appeared behind the first, then another, forming a loose line at the end of the street. Their silhouettes wavered in the fog. Heads tilted at different angles, as if they were listening to something Ethan could not hear. The bell chimed. The sound did not come from any direction. It came from everywhere, vibrating in the fog, in the pavement, in Ethan's teeth. His car was 10 steps away. He ran. He yanked the driver's door open and threw himself inside. The interior smelled normal, like old coffee and air freshener. He jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned once, then died. He tried again. Nothing. The shapes at the end of the street began moving forward, slow but steady, gliding through the fog in unnatural steps. Ethan punched the steering wheel and tried again. The engine coughed weakly, then stalled. The fog pressed closer, thickening around the car. The shapes were halfway down the block now, their details still hidden, but their presence heavy as gravity. Ethan's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Behind him, at the intersection, another shape stood. This one was closer. Too close. It raised a hand. Long fingers. Blackened nails. Ethan's throat tightened. He turned his head slowly. The shape was outside the passenger window, inches from the glass. Its face leaned toward him, features too smooth, eyes too dark. It stared at him with an expressionless intensity that felt older than the city itself. Ethan's breath came in short bursts. The thing pressed its palm against the glass. A faint frost blossomed outward from its hand, spidering across the window in delicate white veins. The air inside the car dropped several degrees instantly. Ethan's skin prickled. He did not scream. He could not. The thing moved its mouth. The seam split slightly, opening just enough for sound to leak out, like air escaping a sealed container. A whisper slid into the car. Not words. A sound like leaves rubbing together, like distant chanting remembered in a dream. Ethan's neck burned where the mark sat. The pain pulsed outward in waves. His vision blurred. For a moment he saw something else reflected in the car window. Not the city street. A forest road. A town with dark windows. A bell tower rising over twisted trees. Greyhollow. He clenched his eyes shut and forced himself to breathe. His hand fumbled for the glove box. He opened it, not knowing what he expected to find. His flashlight rolled out. A pack of gum. Old receipts. And a folded paper that had not been there before. It was thick, yellowed, edges ragged, like it had been carried for years. Ethan unfolded it with shaking hands. A map. Not a printed map. A hand-drawn one, ink lines rough and confident. It showed a forest, a road, and a small town marked with a dark circle. Around the circle was the same jagged symbol branded on his neck. At the bottom of the map, in neat letters, a warning was written. Do not listen to the bell. Ethan stared at the words. The letters looked freshly inked, as if written moments ago. The whisper outside the window grew stronger. The frost spread farther across the glass. The shapes down the street moved closer, their silhouettes sharpening in the fog. Ethan looked up. The thing outside the passenger window had shifted. Its head was tilted farther now, as if intrigued by the map. Its dark eyes flicked down to the paper in Ethan's hands. Then it moved its hand off the glass. The frost stopped spreading. The thing leaned closer, its face nearly touching the window. Its mouth seam widened. This time the sound it made was almost language. A single word formed slowly, like a tongue learning the shape of speech. Return. Ethan's stomach dropped. He shook his head violently, refusing, though he did not know if the thing could even understand. Return, the whisper insisted, and now the word carried weight, like an order. Ethan's hands clenched the map until the paper crumpled. He forced himself to focus. The warning on the map burned in his mind. Do not listen to the bell. The bell chimed again. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut and covered his ears, pressing his palms hard against his head. The sound still came through, not through air but through his bones. It vibrated in his jaw, in his teeth, in his chest. Behind the bell sound, he heard something else. A voice, faint at first, then clearer, cutting through the pressure like a blade. Do not listen. Ethan snapped his eyes open. The thing outside the passenger window jerked slightly, as if it had heard the voice too. Its head twitched toward the darkness behind Ethan's car, scanning. Ethan turned to look. Someone stood on the sidewalk behind him. A man, tall and thin, wearing a dark coat and a cap pulled low. He held an old lantern that cast a warm, flickering light. The lantern glow carved a small pocket of reality in the fog, and within that glow the city street looked more solid. The man raised his free hand and made a sharp gesture, like cutting a line in the air. The bell sound faltered. The shapes in the street hesitated, their movements stuttering like a film skipping frames. The thing at Ethan's window pulled back slightly, as if the lantern light stung it. Ethan's mouth opened. but no sound came out. The man pointed at Ethan's ignition, then made a twisting motion with his hand. Ethan understood without understanding. He turned the key again. The engine roared to life. The sound felt like a lifeline. Ethan slammed the car into reverse. The tires squealed. The thing at the window recoiled, gliding backward into the fog. Ethan backed up fast, almost hitting the curb, then whipped the steering wheel and shot forward down the street, away from the line of shapes. He did not slow down until he reached the next intersection. The fog thinned abruptly. Streetlights blinked on. The distant hum of traffic returned, like the world waking from a nightmare. Ethan pulled over, panting, hands locked on the wheel. His heart hammered so hard he thought he might vomit. He looked back. The street behind him was normal. No fog wall. No silhouettes. No frost on his passenger window. Only the city. And yet, in the rearview mirror, he saw the man with the lantern standing on the sidewalk at the corner, watching him. The lantern flame flickered. The man lifted 2 fingers in a brief gesture that was not a wave, more like a warning. Then he turned and walked into the shadow between buildings. And vanished. Ethan sat there for a long time, staring at the empty spot. When his breathing finally steadied, he unfolded the map again. The ink lines seemed darker now. The route to Greyhollow was clearer, like the map wanted to be followed. The warning at the bottom seemed smudged, as if it had been written in a hurry. Do not listen to the bell. He swallowed hard. He did not want to return. Every part of him screamed to stay away. But he could feel the mark on his neck pulsing in slow rhythm, like a second heartbeat. When it pulsed, he saw faint images in his mind, brief flashes. A bell tower. A dry fountain stained dark. Hands pressed to glass. Faces without faces. A road that led only one way. He drove to his sister's place across town at sunrise, because he could not bear being alone. She was older than him by 2 years, practical, the kind of person who labeled boxes and paid bills early. Her name was Mara, and she had spent the last decade working as a nurse in an emergency department, which meant she had seen every kind of human panic and learned how to speak around it. She answered the door in scrubs, hair tied back, tired eyes sharpening when she saw him. Ethan, what happened to you? He tried to talk. He tried to tell the story. What came out sounded like nonsense even to his own ears. A wrong turn. A town that should not exist. Shapes in the dark. A bell. A door that opened onto a forest. Mara listened without interrupting, but he saw the skepticism in her face, the professional calm she used with patients who came in claiming invisible bugs crawled under their skin. Then he showed her the mark. Mara's expression changed. She leaned closer, fingers hovering but not touching. The symbol looked angry on Ethan's skin, raised slightly now, edges darkened. That is not a bruise, Mara murmured. No, Ethan said, and his voice cracked. It hurts. It feels like it is calling something. Mara looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. Sit down. Drink water. You look like you have not slept in days. Ethan obeyed, hands trembling as he gripped the glass she gave him. Mara disappeared into her bedroom and came back with a first aid kit and a small handheld flashlight. She examined the mark closely, shining light across it from different angles. The skin around it did not react like normal irritation. It looked almost engraved. Mara rubbed her arms as if suddenly cold. Did you take anything? She asked gently. Anything at all? No. I did not drink. I did not use anything. I just drove. I just drove and it happened. Mara's eyes flicked to the map on the table. Where did that come from? It was in my glove box. It was not there before. It just appeared. Mara picked up the map carefully, as if it might bite. Her gaze moved over the hand-drawn lines. The symbol, the warning. Do not listen to the bell, she read quietly. Mara's lips pressed together. She set the map down. Okay, she said, voice controlled. Okay. We are going to handle this step by step. Ethan stared at her. You believe me? Mara hesitated. Then she shook her head. I do not know what to believe. But I know you are terrified, and that mark is not normal. So I believe something happened to you. That is enough." Ethan's chest tightened with relief. Mara pulled out her phone and started searching. "Greyhollow, Pennsylvania," she muttered. "No results. Not for a town." She tried another search. Greyhollow Bell Tower. A few unrelated things. A movie title. A street name in another state. Mara frowned and zoomed in on a digital map app, dragging across northern Pennsylvania. Towns appeared. Roads. Forests. No Greyhollow. Ethan felt sick. "It is not there," he whispered. "It is like it does not exist unless you are trapped in it." Mara stared at the screen, then looked back at Ethan. "Ethan, how did you get out?" He told her about the bell stopping, about the engine restarting, about the man with the lantern. Mara's fingers tightened around her phone. "A man with a lantern," she repeated. "Yes. He saved me." "I think he did." Mara looked down at the map again, then at the mark on Ethan's neck. "We need information," she said. "Real information, not just fear." She stood and went to a bookshelf in her living room. Ethan watched, confused, as she pulled out a thick binder stuffed with papers. It looked old and worn, spine taped in multiple places. Ethan frowned. "What is that?" Mara set it on the table and opened it. Newspaper clippings. Printed articles. Notes written in her handwriting. Photos. Ethan stared. Mara sighed, the sound heavy. "Do you remember Uncle Ron?" Ethan blinked. A vague memory surfaced of a man with a thick mustache and a laugh that boomed, a man who smelled like cigarettes and pine sap, who had vanished from family gatherings when Ethan was young. "He died," Ethan said slowly. "Or, he disappeared." Mara nodded once. "He disappeared. That is what Mom told us. But I found his stuff after Grandma passed. He was obsessed with something. A place. He called it the Hollow." Ethan's skin prickled. Mara flipped through the binder until she found a photocopy of a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline was blurred but readable. "Hikers missing near State Forest." Under it was a photo of a search team, men in heavy jackets standing beside a line of trees. Mara tapped the article with her finger. "This is from 1998. That is when Uncle Ron vanished. He was one of the volunteer searchers. He went in, and he never came out." Ethan swallowed. Mara turned the page. More clippings. More missing persons. Hunters. Teenagers. A couple driving to a cabin. A trucker who vanished after taking a back road. The dates spanned decades. Always in the same region. Always near dense forest. Always with the same strange detail mentioned in a few of the articles. Witnesses reported hearing a bell in the distance. Ethan's throat went dry. Mara pulled out a photograph from the binder. It was a picture of a hand-drawn symbol on a piece of wood. A circle with jagged spokes. Ethan's blood turned cold. "That is it," he whispered. "That is the mark." Mara's eyes were dark. Uncle Ron drew it over and over. He said it was a seal. A brand. A way the Hollow claimed people. Ethan stared at her. "Why did you not tell me?" Mara shook her head. "Because it sounded insane. Because I wanted to believe he was just gone. Not taken by something that does not exist." She opened another section of the binder and pulled out a page of handwritten notes, faded and uneven. The handwriting was not hers. It was older, rougher. Uncle Ron's notes. Mara read quietly, lips moving, then slid the page toward Ethan. Ethan read. "The Hollow is not a town. It is a mouth. It learns roads. It learns names. It waits until midnight. It rings the bell so you listen, and when you listen, it finds the shape of you. Do not listen to the bell. Plug your ears. Bite your tongue. Sing if you have to. The bell is not sound. It is permission. The lantern man is real. He stands at the edge. He can cut the sound. He cannot enter the Hollow. He can only pull you back if you do not belong there yet. If you are branded, you are halfway claimed. Ethan's hands shook as he read. His stomach churned. Halfway claimed. Mara's voice was quiet. Ethan, that mark is not just a mark. It is a hook. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on knees, trying to breathe. So what do I do? Mara hesitated, then flipped deeper into the binder. There is more, she said. She pulled out an old cassette tape in a plastic sleeve. The label was handwritten. Greyhollow notes. Ethan stared. A cassette. Mara nodded. Uncle Ron recorded himself. I found this with the binder. I have never listened to it. Ethan's pulse quickened. Why not? Mara's jaw tightened. Because I was afraid if I listened, I would hear the bell. Silence hung between them. Ethan's neck burned again, a pulse that felt like laughter. Mara stood abruptly. Oh. We are not letting fear run this. We are listening, but we do it smart. We do it in daylight. We do it with the volume low. We do it together. She went to a closet and pulled out an old portable cassette player, the kind their mother used to have. She set it on the table and stared at it as if it might move on its own. Ethan watched, breath shallow. Mara inserted the tape. She did not press play yet. She looked at Ethan. If this starts to sound wrong, we stop. Immediately. Ethan nodded. Mara pressed play. At first there was only static, soft and hissy. Then a man's voice emerged, slightly warped by the tape, but clear enough. Uncle Ron. If anyone is hearing this, he said, then I am either dead or I am something else. I do not know which is worse. The hollow is real. Greyhollow is real when it wants to be. It moves. It hides. It is not on maps because maps are for places that stay put. A pause. A faint sound in the background, like wind through leaves. I went in twice. The first time, I got out because I did not hear the bell in time. The second time, I heard it. It got inside my head. I could not stop listening. It was like the bell was ringing inside my mouth. Another pause. The tape crackled. If you are branded, you are marked for return. You will start seeing doors that are not doors. Roads that lead back no matter which way you drive. People will look wrong. Shadows will gather in corners. They will not touch you at first. They will just watch. They are patient. They are parts of the hollow that learn to walk. Ethan felt gooseflesh rise across his arms. Mara's face had gone pale. Uncle Ron continued. There is a man with a lantern. He stands at the edge. He is not part of the hollow, but he is tied to it. He used to be one of us, I think. He knows the rules. He can cut the bell sound if you have not listened too long. If you hear the bell, do not listen. Cover your ears. Make noise. Pray. Scream. Anything. If you listen, the hollow knows you better. It learns your voice. It learns your memories. It will use them to bait you. The tape hissed louder for a moment. Then Uncle Ron's voice dropped. And if the hollow sends someone you love to call you back, do not answer. It is not them. It is never them. Ethan's stomach clenched. Mara's eyes flicked to him, tense. The tape continued. There is a place in the center of Greyhollow. A dry fountain. Under it is a pit. I saw it when the fog thinned for a second. I saw what the hollow eats. The tape crackled again. There was a faint sound behind Uncle Ron's words. A bell. Very soft. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Mara's hand slammed the stop button so hard the player jolted. Silence. They sat frozen, staring at the cassette player. The bell sound lingered in Ethan's mind like an afterimage. Mara swallowed. Did you hear that? She whispered. Ethan nodded slowly. It was on the tape. Mara's voice shook despite her effort to control it. Or it was in the room. Ethan looked around. The living room lights were on. Sunlight filtered through blinds. The apartment looked normal, but the air felt colder. Ethan's neck burned. He reached up and touched the mark, and he felt something that made his stomach drop. The edges of the symbol felt raised, almost like scar tissue, but beneath that there was a subtle vibration, like the skin itself was humming. Mara leaned in and looked, eyes widening. "It is darker," she whispered. "It is darker than before." Ethan stared at her. "It is getting worse." Mara nodded. "Then we do not wait. We do not pretend it goes away." She stood and began pacing, thinking fast. Okay. Uncle Ron said the hollow learns roads. It learns names. It pulls you back. And you said your door opened to a forest. Ethan nodded. Mara stopped pacing and looked directly at him. "It is already trying to take you. That means you need to do something before midnight." Ethan's mouth was dry. What Mara picked up the map again, studying it with growing intensity. "If it wants you to return," she said slowly, "then maybe returning is not optional. Maybe the only way to break it is to go back on our terms." Ethan felt panic flare. No, absolutely not. I barely escaped. I am not going back." Mara's eyes stayed locked on the map. "Listen, if this is real, then it is not going to stop. It will keep coming through doors, through streets, through your sleep. One day you will hear the bell and you will not be able to block it. And then you will go back anyway, but you will go back alone." Ethan's throat tightened. Mara continued, voice low. "But if we go back together, in daylight, prepared, with whatever the Lantern Man is, maybe we can find a way to cut that mark off you." "I do not know. But doing nothing is not working." Ethan stared at the map, mind racing. The map line to Greyhollow looked like a scar. The symbol at the town center looked like an eye. Mara opened a drawer and began pulling out supplies as if she was prepping for a storm. Flashlights, extra batteries, a lighter, a small first aid kit, a roll of duct tape, foam earplugs from her nursing bag, a thick scarf. Ethan watched, stunned. Mara glanced at him. "We need a plan. And we need to remember the most important rule. Do not listen to the bell." She tossed him the foam earplugs. Ethan caught them, fingers numb. Mara grabbed a notepad and wrote a few words, then tore the page out and shoved it into Ethan's pocket. Ethan pulled it out and read it. "Do not listen," he looked up. Mara's expression was grim. "When fear hits, your mind will try to bargain. The hollow will try to trick you. That note is your anchor." Ethan swallowed. "How do we find the Lantern Man?" Mara's eyes flicked to the binder again. Uncle Ron mentioned him like he was a boundary marker, a constant, a guardian, or a warden. I do not know which. She hesitated, then said something that made Ethan's skin crawl. "Maybe the Lantern Man finds you when the hollow is close. Maybe he appears when the bell starts, because that is when you are on the edge." Ethan's neck pulsed again, as if agreeing. Mara looked at him. "You have to tell me everything that happens from now on. Every weird sound, every shadow, every time the air feels wrong. No hiding it, no brushing it off." Ethan nodded. They spent the afternoon preparing, researching, and failing to find any official trace of Greyhollow. Mara called in sick for her next shift without explaining why. Ethan sat with the binder, reading clippings and notes until his eyes blurred. The stories were all the same in different clothes. A person went missing near dense woods. Someone reported fog. Someone reported a bell. Someone else reported seeing people standing too still in the trees, watching. And in one article, buried in a small paragraph, Ethan found a detail that made his breath catch. A survivor had been found wandering near the highway at dawn, unable to explain where they had been. Investigators noted a strange circular mark on the back of the survivor's neck. Ethan touched his own mark, fingers trembling. Mara leaned over and read it too. She looked sick. Then she flipped the page and found Uncle Ron's handwritten addition beneath the clipping. "If you survive the first encounter, the hollow will try again. It is patient. It does not forget. It tastes you once, and then it wants the whole meal." Ethan pushed the binder away and stood, pacing now himself. "I do not want to be a meal," he whispered. Mara's voice was quiet but firm. "Then we fight." The sun set. The apartment lights felt too bright. The shadows in corners felt too deep. Ethan kept glancing at the hallway, expecting the door to open onto a forest again. At 11:30, Mara forced them to leave. "Better to be moving," she said. "Better to be on the road than trapped in one place when midnight hits." They loaded supplies into Ethan's car. Mara insisted on driving at first, because Ethan's hands were shaking too badly. They left the city behind, heading toward the region indicated on the map. The sky darkened into a deep bruised blue. Stars appeared, cold and distant. Ethan watched the dashboard clock tick closer to midnight. His neck burned more with every mile. At 11:57, the radio turned on by itself. Static. Mara's hand slapped it off immediately. At 11:58, fog began rolling across the road ahead. Mara slowed, jaw tight. At 11:59, the fog thickened until the headlights felt trapped inside it. Ethan's breath shortened. At exactly midnight, the bell rang. One slow chime. Ethan jammed the foam earplugs into his ears. Mara did the same. The sound still came through. Not as loud, but present, pressing at the edges of perception. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut and began humming under his breath, a low continuous sound to drown out the bell. Mara did the same, humming shakily. The bell chimed again. The road ahead shifted. Ethan opened his eyes. The highway was gone. They were on a narrow forest road, trees pressing close, fog thick, moonlight dim. Mara's hands tightened on the wheel. Ethan pulled the map out with trembling fingers and shone his flashlight on it. The drawn road matched exactly. Greyhollow was close. The bell chimed a third time, and Ethan felt something inside his mind try to lean toward the sound, like a muscle twitching toward a familiar habit. He clenched his jaw and hummed louder. Mara reached over and squeezed his arm hard, grounding him. Her eyes stayed forward, focused. Through the fog, a shape appeared at the side of the road. A warm flicker of light. A lantern. The man stood beside it, tall and still in his dark coat. The lantern glow pushed back the fog in a small circle around him, making the trees look more real, less like they were painted on darkness. Mara slowed the car, almost stopping. The man raised his hand, palm outward. "Stop." Mara obeyed. The engine idled. Fog curled around the headlights like smoke. The man stepped closer. Ethan could not see his face clearly beneath the cap brim, but he felt the weight of the man's gaze. The lantern man lifted his other hand and made a gesture toward Ethan's neck, as if pointing to the mark without touching it. Then he spoke. His voice was rough, quiet, as if not used often. "You are branded." Ethan's heart slammed. Mara pulled her earplug out slightly, eyes wide. "You can speak," Mara said, voice trembling. "You are real." The lantern man's gaze shifted to her. "Real enough." Ethan forced himself to pull out one earplug too, keeping the other in. The bell sound was still there, faint but pressing. Ethan spoke, voice hoarse. "What is Greyhollow?" The lantern man looked past them, into the fog, as if watching something moving out there. "Greyhollow is a trap that learned how to look like a town," he said. "It was built from hunger. It wears roads like bait. It rings the bell so you give it permission to enter." Mara swallowed. "How do we stop it?" The lantern man's grip tightened on the lantern handle. "You do not stop it. You survive it. Sometimes you cut loose what it hooks into you. Sometimes you trade something to get away. Sometimes you burn what it can use to find you again." Ethan felt his stomach turn. "Trade something?" The lantern man did not answer immediately. Instead he looked back at Ethan. "You listened already," he said. Ethan flinched. "I tried not to." "But you did," the lantern man said, and the mark on your neck pulsed as if responding. "That is why it can open your door. That is why it can put a map in your glove box. It is learning your life." Mara's voice tightened. "Then help us. Help him." The lantern man's gaze returned to the fog ahead. "If you go in, do not trust what speaks with familiar voices. Do not trust what looks like your memories. Do not drink anything there. Do not eat anything there. Do not follow music. Do not follow light that is not mine. Ethan's throat tightened. "Are you coming with us?" The lantern man shook his head once. "I cannot cross the line." Mara stared. Why, the lantern man's voice dropped even lower. "Because I already belong to it in a way. I stand at the edge because the edge is all I have left." Ethan felt cold sweep through him. "Then why help at all?" The lantern man's mouth tightened. "Because I remember what it is to be you." The bell chimed again, louder now, and Ethan felt his mind tug toward it. The lantern man lifted the lantern higher. The flame flared brighter, and the bell sound dulled slightly, as if the lantern light cut through it. The man spoke quickly now. "The town will try to separate you. Stay together. If you lose sight of each other, you will be led by something wearing the other's face." Mara's hand squeezed Ethan's arm again. Ethan nodded, throat too tight to speak. The lantern man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. He placed it gently on the hood of the car. A small tin charm, circular, etched with rough lines. The same jagged symbol. Ethan recoiled instinctively. The lantern man shook his head. "Not the same. This is the opposite. This is a blindfold. It can confuse the hollow for a moment. Not long. A moment might be enough." Mara reached out and picked it up carefully. "How do we use it? Wear it close to the mark," the lantern man said. "When the bell grows too loud, press it to the skin. It will hurt. Pain is better than listening." Ethan swallowed hard. The lantern man stepped back. "Now go," he said. "The longer you linger at the edge, the more it learns about you from your fear." Mara's hands tightened on the wheel. She nodded once. "Thank you," she said. The lantern man did not respond. He only raised the lantern slightly, the flame flickering. Mara drove forward. The lantern light shrank behind them, swallowed by fog. The trees leaned inward. The road dipped downhill. And there, emerging from the mist like a memory made solid, was the crooked wooden sign. "Welcome to Greyhollow." Ethan's stomach clenched. They passed the sign. The air changed immediately. It felt thicker, colder, like breathing through wet cloth. The fog was heavier here, carrying a faint metallic tang, like old blood. Ethan glanced at Mara. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. They reached the town within minutes. Greyhollow was darker than before, as if it had absorbed what little moonlight existed. Buildings loomed like empty mouths. Windows stared like blind eyes. The town square fountain sat at the center, a black shape against blacker night. Mara slowed the car. Ethan's pulse thundered. He felt the mark on his neck throb in time with the distant bell. They stopped near the town square. The engine remained running, but the sound felt muffled, swallowed by the town. Mara whispered, barely moving her lips, "We do not stay in the car too long. That is how it traps you." Ethan nodded. He pulled the scarf around his neck, covering the mark as best he could. Mara handed him the tin charm. Ethan held it, feeling its cold weight. The bell chimed again, and Ethan's vision blurred. For an instant, the town looked different. Not abandoned. Occupied. Lights glowed dimly behind windows. Curtains moved. Shadows shifted. A faint smell of cooking drifted through the air, impossible and warm. Ethan blinked and it was gone again. The town returned to ruin. Mara noticed his expression. "What did you see?" Ethan swallowed. "It is trying to show me it is normal. It is trying to make me believe it is safe." Mara's jaw tightened. "Then we do not believe." They got out of the car. The cold hit Ethan instantly, seeping through his clothes. The fog clung to his skin. The town smelled like wet wood and something sweet rotting beneath it. They walked toward the fountain. Every footstep sounded too loud. Ethan kept his flashlight beam moving, scanning buildings, alleys, doorways. The shadows felt crowded. As they reached the fountain, Ethan saw something that made his stomach lurch. The fountain basin was not just stained. It was carved. Scratches and gouges covered the stone, deep marks like clawing. And among those marks, carved again and again, was the jagged circle symbol. Mara leaned closer, breathing shallow. "It is everywhere," she whispered. Ethan's neck burned. The bell chimed again. This time it sounded closer, as if the bell tower was just behind them. Ethan forced himself not to turn. Mara gripped his sleeve. "We find the pit," she whispered. Uncle Ron said it was under the fountain. They circled the fountain basin, searching for an opening. Ethan's flashlight beam caught a metal ring embedded in the stone at the base. It looked like a handle. He reached for it. The moment his fingers touched the ring, the town exhaled. That was the only way he could describe it. A deep shift in the air, like a sleeping beast stirring. The fog thickened instantly, swirling around them. From the darkness between buildings, silhouettes appeared. Dozens. They stood motionless, watching. Ethan's heart slammed. Mara whispered, barely audible, "Do not look at their faces." Ethan kept his eyes down, focusing on the handle. He pulled. The stone section groaned and lifted slightly, heavier than it should be. Beneath it was darkness. A hole. Cold air rose from it, smelling like damp earth and something older, like mold that had been growing since the world began. The bell chimed again, and the sound came with a pull, a tug in Ethan's mind toward the hole, toward the darkness beneath the fountain. Ethan's hands shook. Mara's fingers dug into his arm. "Ethan," she said, voice tight. "Do not listen. Do not listen." Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. Then a voice spoke from the fog. "Ethan." His mother's voice. Ethan's eyes snapped open. He turned his head before he could stop himself. A woman stood near the edge of the town square, half in shadow. Her hair was the same dark brown as his mother's. Her posture was familiar, the slight tilt of her head when she was worried. Ethan's throat tightened. Mom Mara's hand slammed into his chest, stopping him from stepping forward. "No," Mara hissed. "No." The woman smiled sadly. "Ethan, come here. You are lost. You should not be here." Ethan's mind screamed for comfort, for the safety of familiarity. He took a step. Mara grabbed his wrist hard, nails biting skin. "Ethan," she said sharply. "Look at her hands." Ethan's gaze dropped. The woman's hands hung at her sides. The fingers were too long. The nails blackened. Ethan's stomach dropped. The woman's smile widened, and the skin of her face tightened, smoothing like wax. Behind her, more silhouettes shifted, as if amused. The bell chimed again, louder. Ethan's neck burned like fire. He shoved the earplugs deeper into his ears, but the sound pressed through anyway, vibrating in his bones. Mara pulled him back toward the fountain hole. "We go down," she whispered urgently. "We do not stay up here." Ethan stared at the hole. Descending into darkness felt like stepping into a throat, but staying above felt worse. The silhouettes began to move forward, slow, gliding. Ethan's breath hitched. Mara swung her flashlight beam low, avoiding their faces, and stepped toward the hole. Ethan followed, heart pounding. Mara knelt and aimed her flashlight down. Stone steps spiraled downward into darkness, slick with moisture. Mara began descending. Ethan hesitated for one last heartbeat. The woman wearing his mother's shape spoke again, voice twisting now, lower. "Ethan, return." Ethan pressed the tin charm to the mark on his neck. Pain exploded through him, sharp and hot, like ice and fire at once. He gasped, but the pain snapped something loose in his head, cutting the bell sound for a fraction of a second, like a curtain pulled back. In that brief silence, he heard something else. Not the bell. A wet breathing sound rising from the hole. Ethan's blood turned to ice. He descended after Mara. The stone hatch scraped shut above them on its own. Darkness swallowed them, leaving only their flashlights and the sound of their breathing. From above, faintly, the bell continued, and beneath it, deeper, the town began to whisper. Darkness closed around Ethan and Mara as the stone hatch sealed above them, the grinding sound echoing down the spiral stairs like a throat swallowing its meal. The air below was colder, heavier, and damp enough that every breath tasted of mildew and rusted metal. Their flashlight beams cut weak cones through the gloom, revealing stone walls slick with moisture, carved long ago by hands that had not cared about comfort or safety. The bell still rang above them. It was muffled now, distant, but it pulsed through the stone like a heartbeat traveling through bone. Each chime sent a faint vibration through the steps beneath their feet. Ethan felt it in his teeth, in his skull, in the mark on his neck, which throbbed like an infected wound. Mara led the way, one hand gripping the flashlight, the other brushing the wall for balance. Her breathing was controlled but shallow. Ethan followed close behind, one hand gripping the tin charm, the other keeping the scarf tight around his neck. The stairs seemed to descend longer than they should have. Ethan counted steps in his head to distract himself, but the numbers stopped making sense. The stairwell curved endlessly, as if the space itself was stretching. The walls felt closer the deeper they went, the stone damp enough to leave residue on their clothes. Then the bell stopped. The sudden silence was worse. Without the bell's constant pressure, Ethan became acutely aware of other sounds. Dripping water, their own breathing. A faint wet sound below, rhythmic and slow, like something large drawing breath. Mara stopped. Ethan nearly bumped into her. She raised a hand, signaling him to freeze. They stood still, listening. The breathing sound was clearer now. Not human. Too slow. Too deep. It echoed through the stone as if the tunnels themselves were lungs. Ethan whispered, barely moving his lips. "Do you hear that?" Mara nodded. They continued downward. The stairs finally ended at a narrow stone corridor. The ceiling was low enough that Ethan had to duck slightly. The floor was uneven, slick with moss and grime. Old iron brackets lined the walls, empty now, as if torches once burned here and were never replaced. The corridor stretched forward, then split into two paths. Left, the air felt colder. Right, the air smelled faintly of rot and something sweet, like overripe fruit. Mara hesitated. "The map," Ethan whispered. Mara shook her head. The map did not show this. Uncle Ron never mentioned tunnels splitting like this. Ethan felt the mark pulse, a sharp flare that made him wince. Without thinking, his gaze drifted toward the right passage. It felt familiar, inviting, like a place he had already been. Mara noticed his hesitation and grabbed his arm hard. "No," she hissed. "You do not choose. It is choosing for you." She turned left without waiting for agreement. Ethan followed, heart pounding. The left corridor narrowed quickly. The stone walls grew rougher, less worked, as if this part of the tunnel had been clawed rather than built. Scratches lined the walls, deep gouges that ran parallel, like something had been dragged through repeatedly. The breathing sound grew louder. Ethan's flashlight beam shook as it swept across the scratches. Some looked old, edges worn smooth by time. Others looked fresh, the stone pale where it had been recently torn. Mara slowed, whispering. This place was not made for people to walk out of. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber. Ethan froze. The room was enormous, far larger than the town square above. The ceiling arched high overhead, disappearing into darkness. Stone pillars rose from the floor like ribs, supporting nothing Ethan could see. The ground was uneven, sloping gently toward the center. And at the center was something that made Ethan's mind recoil. A pit. Not a simple hole, but a massive depression in the stone floor, its edges worn smooth as if countless things had been pulled into it. Darkness filled it completely, swallowing the flashlight beam after only a few feet. The air above it shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt. The breathing came from the pit. Slow, deep, wet. Mara's hand tightened on Ethan's arm. "This is it," she whispered. "This is what Uncle Ron meant." Around the pit, shapes lay scattered across the stone floor. Ethan's stomach twisted as his flashlight beam revealed details. Clothes, shoes, backpacks, a child's jacket, faded and torn, bones. Not skeletons laid neatly, but fragments, splintered pieces. Some gnawed smooth, others cracked and stained dark. The pit had been fed many times. Ethan's vision blurred as panic surged. His body screamed to run, to climb back up the stairs, to escape into the fog and the night. The mark on his neck burned hotter. The pit pulsed. Ethan staggered, suddenly dizzy. For a moment, the chamber shifted. The bones blurred into something else. The clothes rearranged themselves in his vision. They became furniture, tables, chairs. A family picnic laid out neatly. Voices filled his ears, warm and familiar. Laughter. A summer afternoon. The smell of grilled food. Ethan swayed forward, heart aching. Mara saw it happen. She slapped the tin charm hard against the back of Ethan's neck. Pain exploded. Ethan screamed, the sound tearing out of him before he could stop it. The illusion shattered like glass. The chamber snapped back into its true shape. The pit loomed, hungry and vast. Ethan collapsed to his knees, gasping. Mara knelt beside him, gripping his shoulders. "Stay with me," she said urgently. "It is lying. Everything here lies." Ethan nodded weakly, tears stinging his eyes. I saw Dad," he whispered. "I saw us before he died." Mara's face hardened with fury. "That thing has no right." The breathing from the pit deepened, as if amused. From the shadows between the pillars, movement stirred. Figures stepped into the dim light. Not the faceless watchers from above. These were different. They looked more solid, more complete, human. A man stepped forward first, middle-aged, unshaven, wearing a faded jacket and hiking boots caked in dried mud. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, darting between Ethan and Mara. Another followed. A woman with tangled hair, her clothes torn but recognizable. Behind her, a teenage boy clutching a broken flashlight, his hands shaking. More emerged from the darkness, until at least a dozen figures stood around the pit. Survivors. Ethan's heart leapt painfully. Mara stood slowly, keeping Ethan close. "How long have you been here?" she asked. The man swallowed. "I do not know. Days, weeks, years. Time does not work right down here." The woman laughed softly, a brittle sound. "It feels like forever," she said. "But sometimes it feels like it just started." The teenage boy looked at Ethan, eyes wide. "You are branded," he whispered. Ethan flinched. "You can see it," the boy nodded. "It glows sometimes. When the bell rings, it glows under your skin." Mara's jaw tightened. "Why are you still alive?" The man hesitated, then gestured toward the pit. "Because it does not eat everyone at once. It keeps some of us. It learns from us. Our voices, our memories, our faces." Ethan's blood turned cold. The woman spoke again. "If it ate us all, it would have nothing new. No new shapes. No new bait." The breathing from the pit slowed, as if listening. Mara's voice was tight. "Does it let anyone leave?" The man shook his head. "No one leaves whole." The boy hugged himself tighter. "Sometimes it lets someone think they left. Sometimes it sends them back up with a piece missing, or with something added." Ethan thought of the survivors Mara had read about, the ones found wandering highways at dawn. The boy looked at Ethan with desperate hope. "You have the mark. That means it wants you more than us. That means it might let the rest of us go if you stay." Ethan's stomach dropped. Mara stepped forward instantly. "No." The woman raised her hands placatingly. "We are not saying we want you to die, but it always takes a trade. Always. Something it values for something else." Ethan's neck burned violently, the mark pulsing faster. The pit breathed in deeply. A voice rose from it. Not loud, not spoken. A pressure, a thought pushed into their minds all at once. "Return what is owed." Ethan clutched his head, teeth grinding. Mara shook, fighting the intrusion. The man screamed and dropped to his knees, hands over his ears. The pit's surface rippled, the darkness inside shifting like thick liquid. Shapes formed within it. Faces. Some were familiar. Ethan's breath hitched as he saw one clearly. Uncle Ron. His face rose from the darkness, eyes hollow, mouth open in a silent scream. Other faces crowded behind him. Some Ethan recognized from photos in the binder. Others were strangers. Mara gagged, turning away. The pit was not just a mouth. It was a memory grinder. The teenage boy sobbed. "Please," he begged. "Please just give it what it wants so it lets us go." Ethan's chest felt like it was collapsing inward. The pit pulsed again, and the illusion strengthened. Now Ethan saw something else. The town above, alive and warm. Lights glowing. Children playing. Music drifting through open windows. A version of Greyhollow that never abandoned anyone, that never swallowed anyone. A lie so comforting it hurt. The voice pressed again. "They." Mara slammed her flashlight beam directly into the pit. The illusion wavered. "Listen to me," she shouted, voice cracking. "It is not offering peace. It is offering a cage that looks like comfort." The man staggered to his feet. "She is right," he said hoarsely. "I listened once. I stayed because it felt easier than fighting. And every day after that, it took something else from me." The woman touched her face, eyes hollow. "I forgot my daughter's voice," she whispered. "It took that first." The boy sobbed harder. Ethan pressed the tin charm to his neck again. Pain lanced through him, grounding him in agony and clarity. The voice faltered. The pit's breathing quickened, irritated. Mara grabbed Ethan's shoulders, eyes blazing. "We are not trading you. We are not trading anyone." Ethan met her gaze. "Then how do we stop it?" Mara's jaw tightened. "We do not feed it." The man stared. "You cannot starve it. It has been feeding for decades." Mara glanced around the chamber, eyes darting over bones, clothes, pillars. "Maybe not starve," she said, "but we can choke it." She looked at the pit, then at the ceiling. If this place is a mouth, then the tunnels are its throat. And throats can collapse. Ethan's pulse quickened. "You want to bury it?" Mara nodded. "Uncle Ron said something about burning roads, about cutting what it uses to find people. If we collapse the tunnels, if we trap it underground, maybe it loses its reach." The man shook his head weakly. "Even if you do that, it will take time. And it will not let you leave while you try." The pit pulsed violently. The bell rang again, louder now, echoing down the tunnels. From the far side of the chamber, a shape stepped out of the darkness. At first Ethan thought it was another survivor. Then he saw his own face staring back at him. Perfectly copied. Same height, same hair, same eyes. Except the eyes were wrong. Too dark, too still. The thing smiled with Ethan's mouth. "Return," it said in Ethan's voice. Mara screamed. The survivors scattered in panic. The pit breathed in sharply. The copies came faster now. Another Mara stepped from the shadows, her face calm, eyes empty. A copy of the man. A copy of the woman. Copies peeling out of the darkness like reflections stepping free from mirrors. Ethan's heart slammed. The town was done watching. It was hunting. Mara grabbed Ethan's arm and ran. The survivors followed, screaming, stumbling, fleeing from their own stolen faces. The chamber filled with chaos. The pit roared. Stone cracked. Dust rained from the ceiling as the bell rang louder than ever. Ethan ran blindly, following Mara's flashlight beam through a side tunnel he had not noticed before. The walls shook. Cracks split the stone. Behind them, footsteps multiplied. Wet, dragging footsteps, perfectly timed to their own. Ethan's lungs burned. The mark on his neck pulsed like a beacon. Mara shouted over the noise. "Do not let them touch you. If they touch you, they learn faster." Ethan glanced back for half a second. He saw his copy gaining ground, face blank, arms outstretched. The thing opened its mouth and screamed. The scream was not human. It was layered, dozens of voices overlapping, some screaming, some whispering, some laughing. Ethan nearly fell. Mara shoved him forward, keeping him upright. They burst into a narrower tunnel just as stone collapsed behind them, cutting off the chamber in a thunder of dust and debris. The screaming cut off abruptly. Silence followed. They stumbled to a stop, coughing, hearts pounding. Ethan leaned against the wall, gasping. Mara braced herself beside him, shaking. They listened. No footsteps, no breathing, only the faintest distant sound. The bell, still ringing. Ethan looked at Mara, terror flooding back. We did not kill it. Mara met his gaze, eyes fierce despite the fear.
No.
But we heard it. She looked down the tunnel ahead, where darkness waited. And now it is angry. The tunnel breathed. That was the first thing Ethan noticed after the collapse settled and the dust drifted down like gray snow. The stone walls around them seemed to expand and contract almost imperceptibly, as if the earth itself was alive and drawing slow, deliberate breaths. The air carried a low vibration that hummed through Ethan's bones, a reminder that Greyhollow was wounded but far from dead. Mara leaned against the wall, forcing herself to breathe steadily. Her hand shook violently now that the immediate danger had passed, adrenaline draining from her system and leaving fear exposed and raw. Ethan slid down beside her, pressing his back to the cold stone, chest heaving. Behind them, the collapsed tunnel was silent. Too silent. Ethan strained to hear movement. Footsteps. Scraping. Anything. Nothing came. But the bell still rang. Not as loud as before, but persistent, distant, steady. Like a lighthouse beam sweeping endlessly across a dark sea. Mara spoke first, her voice low and tight. That collapse will not hold forever. Ethan nodded. His throat felt tight, his mouth dry. It is learning faster now. The copies were perfect. Mara closed her eyes briefly. It learned from fear, from proximity, from touch. It wanted to touch you. Ethan's neck throbbed violently at the reminder. They stood slowly and moved deeper into the tunnel. Careful, alert. The passage sloped upward now, the air gradually changing. Less damp, less cold. A faint smell of dust and something metallic replaced the rot. The tunnel opened into another chamber, smaller than the pit room but far more disturbing. The walls here were lined with doors. Not stone doors, wooden doors. Dozens of them. Some looked old and warped, their surfaces cracked and peeling. Others looked newer, their wood smoother, handles shiny with use. Each door was set directly into the stone wall, frame embedded as if the rock had grown around it. Every door was closed. Ethan's skin crawled. Mara stopped dead. "This is wrong," she whispered. The air here felt thick with memory. Ethan felt it immediately. A pressure behind his eyes. A tightness in his chest. The mark on his neck pulsed softly, as if recognizing something familiar. Ethan stepped closer to the nearest door without realizing it. Mara caught his sleeve instantly.
No.
Ethan swallowed. "I did not mean to." But they both knew the truth. The doors were calling. A low murmur filled the chamber, barely audible, like voices heard through walls. Not words yet, just tone, emotion, familiar cadence. Ethan's flashlight beam flickered across one door. His name was carved into it. His breath stopped. The carving was crude but unmistakable. Ethan Walker. Mara sucked in a sharp breath. "Do not touch it." Ethan nodded, but his legs felt weak. He turned slowly, scanning the chamber. More names. Some scratched deeply, some lightly, as if hesitant. A few doors bore no names at all. Mara moved cautiously, reading names as she passed. Some were common, some unfamiliar, some half scratched out, as if someone had tried to erase themselves and failed. Mara stopped in front of one door. Her own name stared back at her. She froze. The murmur behind the doors grew louder, as if sensing attention. Mara's face drained of color. Ethan stepped toward her.
Mara.
Her hand trembled as she raised it, then stopped herself inches from the handle. "No," she said sharply.
No.
"It is bait." The murmur rose, turning into whispers now, distinct enough to tease recognition. Ethan heard his father's voice. He heard his mother laughing. He heard himself as a child, calling out from another room. His knees nearly buckled. Mara clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms until blood beaded. "This is how it learns," she said, forcing the words out. "It catalogs. It saves. It replays until you give in." The bell chimed louder. The doors rattled. Not violently, gently, like someone knocking politely from the other side. Ethan felt tears spill down his cheeks. "I want it to stop," he whispered. The whispers surged. "Just listen," they seemed to say. "Just open. Just remember." Mara suddenly laughed, sharp and broken. "No," she snapped. "No, you do not get to wear us like coats." She turned and smashed her flashlight against the stone wall beside the doors. The beam shattered, sparks bursting outward. Darkness swallowed the chamber. The whispers faltered, confused. Ethan fumbled for his backup light, clicking it on. The beam cut through the darkness just in time to see something change. The doors were opening. Not all of them. Just a few. Thin black gaps appeared at the edges as they creaked inward. From behind one door, a hand slid out. Pale. Familiar. It was Ethan's hand. Same scar on the knuckle. Same shape. The fingers curled slowly, beckoning. Ethan screamed and staggered back. The hand withdrew, and a face pressed against the crack, eye peering through. His own eye. Mara grabbed his arm and pulled him away, dragging him toward the far side of the chamber. "Do not look. Do not look." They ran. The whispers followed them, growing frantic, angry. The bell chimed again, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. They burst into another tunnel, narrower and steeper, forcing them to hunch as they climbed. The doors vanished behind a bend in the stone, but the whispers lingered faintly, echoing in Ethan's head. They did not stop running until the tunnel ended. This chamber was different. Natural. The stone here was rough, unworked, veins of dark mineral glinting faintly in the flashlight beam. The ceiling rose higher, and at the far end stood something unmistakable. A stairway. Not carved. Built. Old wooden steps reinforced with iron, leading upward. Mara's breath hitched. Ethan's heart pounded. The bell grew louder here. The air vibrated. They climbed cautiously. The stairway groaned under their weight, the wood damp but solid. With each step, the bell intensified, pressing against Ethan's skull until his vision blurred. At the top of the stairs was a door. Iron-bound. Heavy. Mara pushed. It did not budge. Ethan pressed the tin charm against his neck again, teeth gritted against the pain. The bell faltered slightly. Mara pushed harder. The door creaked open. They emerged into the night. The bell tower loomed above them. It stood at the far end of the town square, taller than any other structure, its silhouette cutting sharply against the moonlit sky. The bell hung within, enormous, dark, its surface etched with symbols that crawled when Ethan tried to focus on them. The air outside felt wrong. Thinner. Sharper. The town around them was no longer fully abandoned. Lights glowed faintly in windows. Shadows moved behind curtains. Figures stood in doorways, watching. Greyhollow was awake. Mara staggered forward, shielding her eyes from the sudden openness. "This is the heart," she whispered. "Or the throat." The bell chimed again, and this time Ethan nearly collapsed. He dropped to one knee, clutching his head. Mara knelt beside him. "Stay with me. Stay with me." The tin charm burned against his skin as he pressed it harder. The bell tower door creaked open. Something moved inside. Footsteps echoed down the wooden stairs. Slow. Deliberate. A figure emerged. The lantern man. But changed. His coat was torn. His face gaunt. His eyes sunken and rimmed with dark shadows. The lantern he carried burned dimmer now, its flame flickering unsteadily. Mara gasped. "You said you could not enter." The lantern man's voice was strained. "I cannot. But it is pulling harder now. When it bleeds, it reaches further." He looked at Ethan. "It wants you at the bell." Ethan forced himself to stand. Why, the lantern man glanced up at the bell. Because you listened. Because you escaped. Because you remember. Mara shook her head. That is not an answer. The lantern man's jaw tightened. Greyhollow was built around something old. Something hungry. Something that could not move on its own. The bell was the solution. It does not summon people. It tunes them. Like instruments. When someone listens long enough, the bell learns how to play them. Ethan's blood ran cold. And the mark is a channel, the lantern man said quietly. A way to keep the signal clear. Mara's voice shook. Can we destroy the bell? The lantern man laughed bitterly. Many have tried. He looked at the tower, then back at them. The bell cannot be destroyed from the outside. Ethan stared. Then how do we stop it? The lantern man hesitated. Then spoke the words Ethan feared. It must be silenced from within. The bell rang again, louder than ever. The town responded. Doors opened. Figures stepped into the street. Not copies now. Whole things. Shaped from memory and hunger. Mara grabbed Ethan's hand. We do not have a choice, do we? Ethan looked at the bell tower. At the open door. At the town closing in. No, he whispered. The lantern man lifted his lantern high, the flame flaring weakly. I will hold the edge as long as I can, he said. But once you step inside that tower, I cannot reach you again. Mara squeezed Ethan's hand. Together. Ethan nodded. Together. They ran. The bell tower door slammed shut behind them. Darkness swallowed them. The bell rang directly overhead. And Greyhollow listened. The bell tower swallowed sound. The moment the door slammed shut behind Ethan and Mara, the world narrowed to the oppressive interior of the tower. The bell rang above them, not echoing but pressing downward, vibrating through the wooden beams, through the ladder rungs, through Ethan's bones. The sound was no longer distant or symbolic. It was intimate. It was inside him. The interior smelled of old wood, dust, and something metallic, like rust mixed with blood. The walls were close, rough boards nailed together in uneven layers, as if the tower had been rebuilt many times by different hands that never quite agreed on its shape. Mara clutched Ethan's arm. Do not listen, she whispered, voice trembling. Whatever happens, do not listen. Ethan nodded, though the effort felt meaningless. The bell was not just sound anymore. It was instruction. It told his thoughts where to go. It pulled memories forward and laid them out like offerings. A ladder rose in front of them, disappearing upward into darkness. The bell hung above that darkness. Waiting. They climbed. Each rung groaned under their weight, the wood slick with age. Dust drifted down with every movement, coating their clothes and stinging their eyes. The bell grew louder with each step, until Ethan felt like his skull might split open. Halfway up, the ladder shook. Not from them. Something moved above. Ethan froze. Mara froze. From the darkness above, a voice drifted down. Soft. Familiar. Her mother's voice. Mara's grip tightened painfully around Ethan's arm. No, she whispered. No. The voice continued, warm and coaxing. You do not need to climb. You are tired. Come back down. Let me take care of you. Mara squeezed her eyes shut, breathing hard. Ethan watched her struggle, terror spiking. The ladder creaked again. A shape descended slowly from above. Mara opened her eyes. Her mother stood a few rungs above them. Perfectly copied. Same face. Same tired smile. Same gentle eyes. Except the eyes did not blink. Ethan felt rage flare through his fear. It is lying, he shouted. The thing smiled wider. It reached down toward Mara, fingers too long, joints bending the wrong way. Mara screamed and kicked upward, slamming her boot into its chest. The copy staggered, then laughed. The laugh was layered, multiple voices speaking through one throat. The ladder shook violently. Ethan pressed the tin charm to his neck again. Pain tore through him like lightning. The bell faltered for a split second. The copy screamed, sound warping into something inhuman, and lost its grip. It fell backward into darkness, vanishing below with a wet, echoing impact. Mara sobbed once, then forced herself to keep climbing. They reached the top. The ladder ended at a narrow platform of warped boards. Above it hung the bell. It was enormous. Larger than Ethan expected, larger than should have been possible inside the tower. Its surface was dark and pitted, etched with countless overlapping symbols. Some looked ancient. Some looked freshly carved. The jagged circle appeared again and again, layered so thick it seemed burned into the metal. The bell rang without moving. The sound came from inside it. Beneath the bell was the mechanism. Not ropes. Not gears. Flesh. Ethan gagged. Veins as thick as cables wrapped around iron supports, pulsing in time with the bell. Wet tissue clung to the metal, fused seamlessly, as if the bell had grown roots into something living. At the center of it all was a shape bound to the structure. A human form. Barely. The Lantern Man. His body was stretched unnaturally, arms pulled back, chest pressed against the bell's interior supports. His skin was gray and cracked, veins dark beneath it. The lantern lay shattered at his feet, flame extinguished. His eyes opened slowly. Ethan's heart shattered. "You lied," Mara whispered. "You said you could not enter." The Lantern Man's voice was barely audible. "I did not. It pulled me when you came close. It needs a keeper." A voice that remembers resisting. Ethan staggered forward. "It is using you." The Lantern Man smiled faintly. "I volunteered. Long ago. That was the bargain. I stayed here to stop it from reaching farther. To dull the bell. To warn those who could still turn back." The bell rang louder, angry now. The Lantern Man winced. "It knows you are here to end it." Mara shook her head frantically. "There has to be another way." The Lantern Man looked at Ethan. "There is only one way. The bell needs a voice to ring, a mind to tune. When I am gone, it will look for another." Ethan's stomach dropped. The Lantern Man's gaze softened. "You are already marked, already connected. That is why it wants you. But that is also why you can poison the signal." Mara stepped between them. "You are not taking him." The Lantern Man's breath rattled. "Listen to me. The bell cannot be destroyed, but it can be silenced. Permanently." Ethan's head throbbed. How the Lantern Man swallowed. "The bell needs a listener. If you give it a listener who refuses to listen, it collapses inward. The signal loops. It eats itself." Ethan stared. "You want me to replace you?" "No," the Lantern Man said. "I want you to end it." The bell rang again, shaking the tower violently. Wood cracked. Dust rained down. From below, footsteps echoed upward. Many. The town was climbing. Mara looked around wildly. "Ethan." "No. There has to be another sacrifice. Take me instead." The Lantern Man shook his head weakly. "It must be someone already branded. Someone it believes belongs to it." Ethan felt strangely calm. He thought of the doors, the pit, the faces, the copies wearing his memories like masks. He stepped forward. Mara grabbed him, sobbing. "Ethan, please." He cupped her face gently. "Listen to me. This thing feeds on memory, on regret, on unfinished lives. If I stay, it starves." Tears streamed down her face. "You are my brother." "I know," Ethan said softly. "That is why it will fail." The Lantern Man nodded faintly. "You must not listen, no matter what it shows you, no matter what it promises." Ethan took a breath. "Help me." The Lantern Man summoned the last of his strength and pulled himself free from the bell's bindings. Flesh tore. The bell screamed. Ethan screamed too. They traded places. The moment Ethan touched the bell, the mark on his neck burned white-hot. He felt the town flood into him. Every road, every scream, every voice that had ever vanished into Greyhollow. The bell tried to sing him. He screamed back. Not words. Defiance.
Pain.
Memory sharpened into weapons. He remembered Mara laughing as a child. He remembered his father's voice telling him he was brave. He remembered the fear and chose not to give it meaning. The bell howled. The veins around it shriveled. The cymbals began to crack. Mara screamed his name, pounding on the platform. Ethan forced his eyes shut. Do not listen. The bell rang once more, then collapsed inward with a deafening metallic shriek. Silence followed. Absolute. The tower shuddered. The flesh withered to ash. The cymbals flaked away. The bell split down the middle and fell apart, crashing through the tower floor and down into the depths below. Wind rushed upward. The sound of footsteps stopped. Mara crawled forward, screaming. Ethan fell, but not into darkness. Light flooded his vision. He woke on asphalt.
On.
A highway shoulder. Birds singing. Cars passing. Mara lay beside him, crying, gripping his jacket like she might never let go. The bell tower was gone. The forest was normal. The road stretched clean and empty behind them. Ethan touched his neck. The mark was gone. Weeks later, Greyhollow could not be found. No maps showed it. No reports mentioned it. But sometimes, late at night, Ethan hears a sound in the distance. Not a bell. Wind through trees.
And he knows. Somewhere, something listens.
But not very well.
Before you go, look around the room for a moment. The story may have stopped here. If any of these stories stayed with you, you're not alone. Comment below the moment that made you pause, the part you can't stop thinking about, or the timestamp that felt too real. And if you don't want to face nights like this alone, subscribe now. New true horror stories every night, longer, darker, and closer to home. Turn off the lights, keep the volume low, and check your surroundings one last time. Good night.